Welcome everyone to another episode of Closing Time with Pat and Dennis. We're delighted to have another episode today all about sales and sales leadership. So Pat, I'll kick it over to you.
All right. Hey, well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Closing Time with Pat and Dennis, and thank you for listening in. We are really excited today because we are on the topic of sales, hiring, sales leadership, and sales management, and we are fortunate and excited to have someone who's no rookie to that subject. We have Brandon Herman, who is a partner at the Cole Group with us today. So welcome, Brandon. And we know that Brandon, he actually kind of has seen it from all sides of the spectrum as it relates to hiring and being a sales leader, because prior to becoming a partner at the Cole Group, Brandon was also the group vice president at Medallia, helped that organization execute a IPO and then a subsequent acquisition from the Thoma Brovo private equity organization. And then after his stint at Medallia, he happened to be the senior vice president of revenue, or the CRO, of Guild, who was I think they were number 32 on the Forbes Cloud 100 list and the Time 100 most influential company. And he helped them go through quite a period of rapid growth. And so welcome to the podcast, Brandon.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate the introduction. Thanks, Dennis. Appreciate you guys having me.
You bet.
Great. Yeah. So great to have you, Brandon. And it's great to see that you're not only focused on hiring great talent today, but that you've actually walked the walk as well in terms of being a big sales leader yourself in an organization. And yeah, maybe if we kick off with what do you look for in hiring great sales leaders, managers as a starting point?
Yeah, sure. So we're exclusively focused on sort of top jobs. So CRO, head of sales roles. And I think there's really three points of failure when you're trying to hire a CRO or a head of sales. Is the person motivated to do the job to be done? Is the person a culture fit for the organization? And does the person have the skills to accomplish the priorities for the role? So what we're really trying to do is we're trying to really dig deep and understand, both from the company perspective and the candidate perspective, if there's a good match across all of those three dimensions. And of course, there's sort of some sub bullets under each of those that you need to dig deep into and understand.
Great. Looking forward to diving into some of this. And in terms of the first role of like finding great talent, so you have a playbook for how to get a good talent into that organization or find those individuals. But yeah, where do you first of all go to find them or identify them?
So because our firm is exclusively focused on hiring senior executives, typically from top tier VC backed or public companies, it is a finite universe of those companies out there. And all of our partners are devoted to essentially knowing the best people across those companies. So we have a built-in network already of folks that we know. Look, most hiring managers and most VCs, right or wrong, are looking for a few things. They're looking for people that have had great tenures with great trajectories at great brands who can point back to having a really high impact within those companies. Typically those are sort of the places that we start looking.
Great. And in your experience, what are the most important leadership qualities that distinguish great leaders from average ones? I know you talked a little bit about what they need to have, but then where do you find that people overachieve in those groups?
Yeah. And Brandon, not to interrupt you, but sure. I'd be curious to get your perspective on what you today consider to be those traits or characteristics, and what you thought they were when you were in an operating role.
Yeah,
what changed?
It's a good it's a good question. I don't know that the traits or characteristics have fundamentally changed. I think maybe the way that I sort of evaluate for them have changed to a certain degree. But I think the thing that's always important for me to remember, and the things I always try to coach founders and CEOs on as they're looking to make hires, is there is no best sales leader. There is no best marketing leader. There's a best sales leader for you. right? And like that is really the most important thing. And I think it's where a lot of executive search goes wrong is that, people are either just doing lazy pattern matching or they're just throwing candidates at a founder or a hiring manager versus really digging deep and doing the right amount of discovery to understand, like, what is the job to be done? What is the hill to be climbed? Like, what are the priorities for the role? What is the culture of the company? And the more you can understand those things, now you can both identify the ideal candidate profile to match those things, and you can build an entire assessment process around those things, right? So a sales leader that's great for early stage is not necessarily and is likely not a sales leader that is a good fit for late stage and at scale. A sales leader that is a great fit for a hyper velocity SMB machine is, of course, not likely to be a great fit for a strategic enterprise motion. So like really good search starts with what are the priorities for the job and like really honing in on this.
Yeah, so almost like having you would have an ideal customer profile for your company in terms of where you're going to go focus your time and what are either the skills, the knowledge, the traits, whatever it happens to be that would be best suited in order for you to accomplish what your current objectives are for your company. And do you find that with and I'll say this more so for founder owners that it takes a lot of work to get them to start to recognize that you really do need to put a lot of time into what's your ideal profile or what your ideal candidate profile looks like for the role that you guys at your current stage in your company, or what's kind of the interaction that goes on for you?
Yeah, obviously it varies again across stages, and we operate all the way from, seed through early stage public. And, if you're operating with and leading a search for the CEO of an early stage public company, it's a different dynamic than a first time founder of a seed or series A company. But we try to be very upfront before we ever take a search about what our process is. And like if a founder or hiring manager isn't well aligned with that process, then we're just not going to be the right partner. So usually we have good alignment before we ever even jump into a search that like, hey, we're going to spend hours and hours with you and your leadership team and your board and your investors. And we're going to understand your company in a level of depth. And if you're not, willing or able to sort of put that time in and engage in that way, then like we're probably just not the right partner for you.
Okay. Interesting.
And do you have like once you get the ideal customer profile or the job description really well nailed down and quantified, do you then kind of mostly have like a network that you already know of certain talent, or is there actually like more junior individuals going out with this profile in mind looking?
Yeah, so our firm is different than many other search firms in the sense that we do not have a leveraged model. We have no junior people. Everything that we do is partner led. So all the way from the discovery with the client to the candidate identification to pitching the candidate to assessing the candidate to the weekly search calls. So we're much more of sort of a white glove, low volume service. We work on a very small number of searches at a given time. And we sort of pour ourselves into those searches without like the help of leverage, like a lot of firms would have.
Yeah. Is it mostly people you're displacing from a previous role, or they're looking, or is there a kind of a percentage?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd say about 80% of our hires are passive candidates. So, of course, you come across great people that are actively looking in the market. Like that is, of course, a thing. But most of the people that our companies are looking to hire are people that are like firmly established and often happy in the job they have. But we've done a good job, I think, of sort of creating a brand and a reputation for ourselves in the market that we take on good searches, and we're not transactional with candidates about like the way that we engage. So like, I'm not going to try to push a search on a candidate that I don't think is a great fit for them. So it helps us, I think, in terms of like candidates' willingness to engage with us in market.
I'm curious, do you have kind of what I call a baseline of whether it's traits or characteristics that you look for so you're starting up a search, and obviously, understood that your ICP or your ideal candidate profile could be different depending on whether it's, Series A and it's a founder, leader, or it's a, Series C or D. You may still have founder leaders, but you may have some more mature, I'll call it, leadership team. But are there certain fundamental traits that you look for in terms of when you're, trying to assess or source these candidates that are kind of like, if you don't have this, it's kind of a non-starter. And so what's your
Yeah, I
process on
mean,
that?
so we have this concept of an MET, or a minimum experience threshold. And our kind of core belief is that too many hiring managers spend too much time during the interview process assessing somebody's experience versus assessing their skills, culture fit, and motivation. So what we try to do up front is we try to get very tightly aligned with the founder about what is the minimum experience threshold that needs to be cleared for candidates. We will then assess for that up front. And now you don't have to spend more time doing that. So for instance, if many companies want to hire somebody that has seen the journey that they're about to go on, right? If you're a $20 million ARR company and you're looking to go to 100, oftentimes your ideal hire is somebody that has seen a journey somewhere in that range from 20 to $100 million, right? So in that particular case, the minimum experience threshold might be like, hey, look, I don't want to talk to anybody that hasn't operated in a company smaller than $100 million or bigger than $5 million, right? So like, we're going to assess for that right off the bat. In some cases, people might want domain expertise, and you see that in some industries more than others. Security is a great example where, oftentimes hiring managers are looking for domain expertise. In that case, we're only going to hunt for people that come from the security domain. So like, again, it all really goes back to right up front, kind of aligning with the founder or the CEO or the hiring manager on what the minimum requirements for the role are. And then we're going to check through those boxes. And then let's now focus the rest of the search assessment on motivation, culture fit, and skill fit.
Are you and are y'all getting engaged with the board as well? I mean, obviously, when you're at earlier stage, sometimes the board has their preferences and they're helping out the founder CEO because they haven't ever been in a leadership role before. And so, how much does that get in? I'll say mixed into your process, and as you guys go through this to bring on the right people for the organization.
Yeah, in most searches, we will do some level of discovery with the board.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, at a minimum, what that's going to allow us to do is like understand the investment thesis that they had in the company. Because there's two parts to a search, right? There's trying to identify candidates that you actually want to hire, and then there's being able to attract the candidates that you want to hire. And the more you understand about sort of the investment thesis in the business and why, these, smart VCs that did their diligence, wanted to be a part of this company, the better it's going to help us pitch them. And then also, what you don't want to do is you don't want to get to the end of the search and have like an influential board member basically say, hey, I think the whole thesis of this hire was wrong. I don't think what you needed was somebody that looked like X. I think what you needed was somebody that looked like Y. And now you spent, 3 months kind of chasing your tail versus, again, like just from the very start, let's make sure we understand all of the different stakeholders who are going to have a say in this process, right? And let's understand that, like, let's them have a voice, and let's make sure that we're all aligned about that.
Yeah, it's only reason I asked you that is because I've seen that many times where what the leader that is currently leading the company, whether the CEO, founder, CEO, whatever it happens to be, and what the board is thinking in terms of this critical role. Because I mean, without getting that sales and marketing and customer acquisition motion going at the velocity you want to be, then it's all for naught, right? You may have the best product in the world, but if you can't figure that out, then who cares, right? And so that's why I was asking you. And I think it kind of also speaks to your comment that you said, you all have this minimum threshold of what, the MET, I think you called it, where, you can talk about, let us, meaning the recruiting firm, you guys are Cole Group, vet out whether this person has I'll call it, do they have the experience? Do they understand the how to do it? Do they understand what they need to be doing? But the part that I find that has been kind of the thing that kind of, I'll say, puts the odds in your favor is this idea that you talked about, which is what are the traits or characteristics about this person that they need to possess, and or what is the cultural type of fit or style? So maybe you can give us a little bit of, I'll call it insight or, your perspective on number one, how do you go and figure that out about candidates? Because that in and of itself is not a trivial, I'll say, excursion to try to figure out how to do. But and number two, how do you know that you're actually aligning with what you believe is the cultural norms or the culture of the company that you're working for? Because you're getting it and exposure, you know, for whatever it is, days or weeks, and that then you're going to have to make your own assessment of what that looks like. So sorry for the long
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I mean, I think triangulation is sort of the best that you can do. And it's an imperfect, it's more art than science to that, right? The more people that you talk to within the business. And like, you know, it's another reason why board members who have like a bit of like, you know, distance from like the actual operating environment themselves can provide some different context as well. So you're always just trying to triangulate. And look, I'm always like wary of the culture piece because there's this balance you want to strike, which is like culture isn't a static thing. It's this dynamic, evolving thing. And you don't want to be too homogenous in the way that you try to build your culture. You want to assert, you know, different people with diverse opinions and insights and ways of operating into your business, but you also need to walk a line. And like, so for instance, like there are some cultures that are just like exceedingly direct. And like, you know, they need somebody that is going to come in and be very direct. There are other cultures that like, you know, if you've got sharp elbows, like you're just not going to last long there. You know, it's just like hyper collegial people are just like a little more, you know, so I think just like understanding some basic premises of the culture like that. And you know this, Pat, and you know this, Dennis, as well. You know, look, there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat as a sales leader, right? Like there's sales leaders that can come in and they are, you know, you always want high accountability, high performance sales leaders, but there's different ways that you can create a culture around accountability and performance. And, you know, I've talked to hiring managers before where they say, hey, look, I want somebody that is going to come in and essentially like crush what I perceive to be the culture of entitlement within our go-to-market organization, right? And you hear words like that, and it's like, okay, I think I know what you're getting at in terms of the persona that you want. I have other other hiring managers that want the exact opposite of that. And like that type of sales leader, there would be organ rejection within the company almost immediately. So those are the types of things that we're trying to sniff out.
And do you ever use things like behavioral assessments and that to verify what you perceive to be the cultural, I'll say, fit of the candidates themselves, especially when you were, for example, when you were running the show at Guild or things like that? You know, what were the ways that you verified this cultural thing? Because I agree with you, Brandon, and I know Dennis has the same thoughts, which is I don't think it's so much about, you know, I think you guys can do a great job of assessing, you know, the how and the what's, but the why part of it, which is aligned with the cultural, that one's a little bit trickier. And it's usually the thing that makes or breaks the candidate from being successful or not. So, you know, give me your thoughts on the tools that you use to figure that cultural fit.
I think there's two things. One is, so we do not typically use sort of the behavioral assessments or tests as a part of our process.
Yeah.
One though is the more time candidates can spend with hiring managers and colleagues and executives ahead of taking a job, like the better. And like, you know, like just the more dinners, the more lunches, the more coffees, the more out of office experiences that they can have, right? You just start to, and, you know, for instance, like one of the things that we require as a part of our process is like a working session as a part of the assessment. Like, you know, like let's get in the room and for a half day work through a problem the way we'd actually try to work through a problem if we were working together once the candidate starts. And you get a level of signal from those types of exercises, as well as the coffees and the lunches and the dinners, that you can't necessarily get from a more kind of traditional interview process. So that's part one. And then I think maybe the most powerful tool are just references and back channels, right? Like I think at the end of the day, go-to-market folks and sales leaders in particular are quite good at understanding what a hiring manager wants. And many of them are quite good at presenting themselves as a good fit for that. But like what tells the tale are the people that they've worked for, the people that they've worked with, and the people that have worked for them in the past. And a combination of really rigorous like front door traditional referencing and like very rigorous back channel and backdoor referencing usually tells the tale as well as anything else. But again, you know, it's imperfect, but it's like, you know, you're trying to mitigate these risks, but you can never eliminate them.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I used to do is, and I put a pretty good weight on, is that if I could figure out who had worked for this person, especially if I'm bringing in a sales leader, right, type of thing, who had worked for that person before, what was it like working for them? Would you work for them again, and why? Right, that type of thing. Like you said, the background references checking and that sort of thing, and not just who they had worked for before, because I don't know. I found that when I talked to their boss, of course they're going to give me their best possible bosses, to go ahead and have as their reference, right? But I didn't learn as much about what it is I'm going to have to accommodate for in order to make them be successful in this organization from that person. I learned more from, let me talk to the people that work for them, and what was it about them that they found that good, what was tough to deal with. That way I can sit there and go, oh, okay, well, how is that going to fit in my culture here or not, as the case may be, right? And then I can, if I believe that candidate or that leader is going to be the one that, is going to be able to handle that role, I then have a plan to how do I go ahead and make sure they're integrated in and get ramped up as quickly as possible and in the best possible position to be successful in the organization.
Yeah, I mean, that resonates with me. I think, I use the word triangulation again, and I think there's value in, we always ask candidates for 3 ups, 3 sides, 3 downs. I want to talk to 3 people that you've reported to, 3 colleagues that you've worked with, and 3 people that have worked for you. And then on top of that, we are going to use our network to do back channels because, of course, as you said, people are going to put their best foot forward in the references. And what you want is a holistic 360-degree honest picture of, the spikes and potential deficits that this candidate has, because, nobody's perfect, right? Everybody's got their gaps. And I think there's a real art to references as well. Like, the more context you can give the person that you're doing the reference call with about the job to be done, about the culture, about the priorities, the better equipped they're going to be to tell you if this person is great or not, right? Because there are sales leaders who are fantastic at building a go-to market strategy, who are not going to be as great at rolling up their sleeves and getting into the deals and helping reps get things closed or coaching those reps. And so what we're really looking for is, what is this person's superpower? What are their real spikes? What are their real strengths? Where are their deficits? Where are the things that they're just okay at? And then, like, what we try to tell founders is, in general, you want to hire for strengths, not a lack of deficit, right? Which is, if you really understand your priorities and you really understand what it's going to take you from where you are today to where you want to go tomorrow, now let's go try to find the person that's got the greatest strengths around driving those priorities.
Yeah.
That's great. And one question on the back channeling, like where you said about the references they provide 3 ups, 3 sides, 3 downs. Do you have a magic kind of number for back channeling as well, in case you get an anomaly?
Yes, great question. Our belief on references is that you keep doing them until you stop learning new information. So basically, like, you just keep going. Every time there's like a new thing that comes up, oh, fascinating. That's a thread I want to pull. Is that a one-off where they just had a personality conflict with that person? Or is that going to be a consistent thing? So there's no like magic number. It's like, just keep going until you stop learning new things.
Wow. It must be time intensive as well, right?
It's super time intensive. And I mean, again, it is why, our firm is a premium priced firm, because you can only work a small number of searches with that level of sort of intensity and rigor. Yeah, like, that is definitely our calling card, is more of a white glove type of service for founders.
Yeah. Actually, one question: if things go wrong with the hire, so the organ is rejected, like, what is your point of view for founders, CEOs, if they're starting to realize it's a bad fit? Is it like, make that decision quite quickly, or what's your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I guess the question is, it depends, but in general, like, if you have conviction that you have gotten it wrong, then you need to move on sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
I think would be the general premise. Now, like, there's always like, a lot of times we are coaching and helping founders try to think about, like, hey, like, what's not working? What's working? What's different about, like, what you bought with this candidate than you thought you were going to be buying with this candidate? And there are some cases where it's just like, oh, they just haven't been set up to succeed, right? Like, like, they haven't been resourced appropriately. You hire somebody that spiked here. You hired a seller profile leader who's the best seller in the world, but might not be the best operator. And you haven't supported that person with a great RevOps leader, right? Where it's just like, oh, okay, we can fill that gap organizationally and structurally. Doesn't mean you had a bad hire. It just means you don't have the right org structure to support that hire. But if you feel like there's just a fundamental culture fit or motivation fit or a real skill fit where you thought you were getting something that you just didn't, then in general, you want to move on sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Is it, and I was going to ask just about like seed versus early stage IP or IPO. They're the two areas you focus on, right?
Well, we do everything from very little
Okay.
seed, but mostly Series A through early stage IPO. So we'll do A, B, C, D, all the way through sort of a early stage, small cap, public tech company.
Yeah. And is it kind of a general rule of thumb of like more involved sales, like leader who's rolling up their sleeves, the smaller, or not so much, you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously as companies grow, usually what they're looking more for is a go-to-market architect that can architect a holistic go-to-market vision and then drive, accountability and performance like within that. But obviously, as you scale more and more, like leaders are often more. You're indexing often more for strategic chops than you are necessarily for like the roll up your sleeves, get in the deals type of leader. Now there are some exceptions to that. In general, that's a rule of thumb.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Brandon. So when we were talking a little bit about where sometimes there's some pitfalls on where you have buyer's remorse, right? But what would you say is I'll say when you kind of look at there's the process that you're going through, which is you're evaluating and trying to bring in the best possible fits for their organization at the stage that they're at in their life and what they're trying to get to. And then there's their own internal process that they need to have as part of vetting out the candidates and making sure that there's good alignment with the other leaders that are in the organization. Where have you seen where that falls apart? Meaning I'll call it in this case, the buying company's process and evaluating and hiring them in there. What do you typically see where that kind of goes, boom?
Well, I would say part of our job and any good search partner's job is to help them understand and align on what their buying process or hiring process should be, right? So that is one of the things very early in the process that we align on, which is who are the people that need to be in the interview loop? And what are those people assessing against, right? Those are like two really important things to establish right up front. And in general, you want people assessing back against the priorities for the job and like the culture fit and motivation fit within the organization. But yeah, that's something that we try to align on at the very, very beginning of the process.
Yeah, what I noticed a lot of times when, especially probably more like A and B stage companies. And, I'm working with various, VCs or working with their, portfolio company CEOs or typically founder CEOs. And what I've noticed is that they don't put together, they can put together an ideal candidate profile, but what they don't think about is, well, how do we know that we're getting what we're hoping that we're getting, so to speak, right? I mean, we know we're working with somebody that's that can recruit them for us. We an executive search firm like yourselves, but they have to kind of put together how do we know we're getting what we think we want to get, right? And if we're going to have all these resources, our executives or people within the organization actually speak with them, let's make sure that they're talking to them about what it is that's going to align best with their functional organization or what they want to know about it, as opposed to everybody asking them the same questions. I see this a lot of times. I don't know if you do, but they're sitting there and they have them, okay, we're going to have them to meet with, let's say they're hiring a CMO, right? We're going to have them meet with the head of sales. We're going to have them meet with the customer success people. We're going to have them meet with the product. And they don't kind of have I'll call it a plan of how do we, what are the questions you're going to be asking and what are you going to be trying to vet out about the candidate type of thing, right?
For sure. And there's just a ton of data that shows that structured interviewing works better than unstructured interviewing. And that type of alignment right up front is really important. And in the absence of that, oftentimes what you end up with are sort of just these vibe check hires, right? Which is just like, oh yeah, I liked him, I liked her, right?
Exactly.
Well, why, right? What was it about them that makes you think they are going to, transform the trajectory of this business?
Yeah.
One of the things I often suggest founders ask themselves is this question, which is, I will hire this person if I have conviction that they can fill in the blank. Like, what's the thing? If I am convicted that they can, and don't just stop with like double my revenue next year. What's required to do that, right? Is that you need to build a outbound sales motion? Is that you need to drive better alignment across marketing and sales and success? Is that you need to layer on top a sales assisted and sales led motion on top of the PLG motion that you have working really well today? Is that you need to move from a more transactional motion to a more strategic enterprise motion? Like, what is the thing that if you like that will take you from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow? And if you gain conviction in their ability to do that thing, that's your hire, right? And you can't have 10 things, right? Like, not, what's the saying about if you have more than 3 priorities, you have none?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
you cannot have more than 3 things like on that list.
Yeah, I like it.
That's
And,
great.
and I think the other thing is because I know, at least in speaking with a lot of the folks that I've worked with, whether it's board members or it's CEOs or whatever it happens to be, there's kind of like 3 buckets that you're looking at as it relates to the people that are heading your go-to-market, right? There's what is their ability to, I'll say, develop and, plan strategy, right? The second thing is what is their, I'll call it, business acumen around operational or, how do you go about putting in these processes, making the transition or the integrations within the organization? And then the third thing is leadership, right? Is something that they're going to try to understand about these candidates. They're taking leadership roles. And that's not just specific to a CMO. That could be to a CRO, that could be to a head of product, whatever it happens to be. And so in your experience, what has been the, I'll say, the area that is most difficult for these, whether it's the CEO or it's the board members or it's the other leadership, what has been the most difficult for them to evaluate and or assess?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to like aligning up front that you're always making trade-offs in whoever it is that you're hiring in your business. And, we have a framework that I think largely mirrors the one that you just articulated. And of course, like every framework is imperfect and incomplete. So the way that like we think about it is, you're either hiring a leader archetype, a seller archetype, or an operator archetype. Yeah. And in general, at best, you're buying 2 out of 3 of those things. Very, very few people are really going to spike in all 3 of those areas. Yep. And, the leader is, you just alluded to, it's the person that is great at hiring talent, inspiring and motivating talent, building trust throughout the entire organization. The seller is the leader who is like, man, like that person is actually like the best salesperson in the whole organization, even though they're the leader. They're the ones that every single seller wants on the call, wants in the room, because like they're going to help get these deals closed. And then the operator is like the engineer. It's like the systems builder, the machine builder, the person that can build scale and efficiency throughout the organization. So like, I think the biggest thing is like upfront, like, what do you need? What are you optimizing for? What are you prioritizing in that hire? And like, and versus saying, I want it all, because like, you're going to find yourself disappointed if I want it all is the answer, because there really is no one that has it all.
And I would ask you this, which is then maybe a different way to ask the question, which is, so let's say kind of B, C, D type thing. If they're have a deficit in one of those areas, whether it's the strategy, whether it's the operational business acumen and execution, or the leadership, which is the most difficult to recover from or to develop so that they can get you to where you want to go?
Yeah, when you say like recover from, like, so like,
well, if you're gonna get 2 out of 3, right? You decide, we know we're only getting 2 out of 3. So what? And not maybe recover from is the wrong word to use, but which is the most difficult that if you see that that's not their strongest suit, and you think that you can maybe develop them into whatever's sufficient for them to be able to execute in the role, which of those is the most difficult to try to develop their acumen in? How's that?
Yeah, and I'm not sure that's exactly how I think about it. And there's no, I don't know that there's a right or wrong way to think about it. I think, like, in general, I come at things from more of like a strengths-based approach, which is to say, hey, people are better served by leaning into their strengths, and organizations are better served by hiring people that truly excel and spike in certain areas while complementing them and supporting them in others. I just feel like it's like a low leverage, like, use of time and effort in many cases to take somebody who is like not a extraordinary like systems builder and operator, but is a fantastic leader and salesperson, and try to turn them into that. Whereas, like, versus saying, hey, I can support that person with a fantastic RevOps, leader. I can support that person by hiring great geo leaders that run North America who are like machine builders in orientation, right? So like I think about it more from an organizational design perspective than like let's try to make this person what they're not perspective.
I agree with you. And so the reason why I was asking you that is because what I have noticed in, I'll call it B, C, D stage companies, right, is if they don't have good leadership skills, meaning that's not their strongest suit, they're really good at the, at the execution part of it or the selling part and stuff like that. That has been the one where that they weren't able to, I'll call it, supplement themselves in those other two areas. How's that? If they didn't have the good leadership, meaning the ability to go out, evaluate, hire, and bring in strong people that augment where they're maybe not as strong at, whether it's in putting in the systems and process or whatever, like you call it, regional leaders. So anyway, I was just curious to get your perspective.
Yeah, it's a great call out. I mean, look, if you're not a talent magnet, then if you can't identify, hire, develop, and retain great people, is going to be very hard for you to be like successful. So I absolutely agree with like that. And that's like a foundational component.
Yeah. I was going to add a build on like, the strategy operator side of things. I think you also need an organization where you can spend money on that area if they have a gap to put people around them or not. If it's early stage, it's harder to like put that in, but it maybe is not as needed as much as well.
And not every company needs it, right? There's some companies like, hey, like I don't even have freaking product market fit yet. And I just need somebody that can like roll up their sleeves, get out there, get in front of customers, test and learn, fail fast, and it's just a different thing that they need.
Yeah. One other question I have, Pat mentioned CMOs earlier, and I understand you hire CMOs as well. Like, what are the traits and skills that are different between a CMO and a CRO that like come straight to mind for you?
Yeah. So marketing is like interesting in a lot of ways. And in some ways I find it to be more interesting and more challenging than trying to hire sales leaders. Many great marketers are a combination of like left brain and right brain. And that is a hard thing to find, one. And then two, marketers, unlike sales leaders, come up through silos, right? Sales leaders, typically do the same job, but take on more and more scope as they advance through their career.
Yeah.
Whereas a marketer is a brand marketer, a product marketer, a demand and revenue marketer, and they are coming up through a silo that often gives them pretty limited exposure to like holistic marketing. And many times you have not been a full stack marketer until you are a full stack marketer. So like, it's a very interesting like hiring process, trying to assess, especially with these archetype 2 step up candidates, who is going to be able to effectively make the leap. And oftentimes, again, that just goes back to, look, what is it that you're hiring for? Like, do you need, like, where's the spike? Is the spike that you need in product marketing? Because really what you need is, pricing and packaging, storytelling, messaging, competitive differentiation, and somebody that can help me figure those things out is great, as long as they now can just hire a great demand gen leader. Or is it like, hey man, I've got my story, I've got the messaging, I know how we're positioned within the market. I just need like more top, mid, and bottom of funnel, like demand gen execution and expertise. So like, you're really having to make those trade-offs in spades often when you're hiring marketers.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think I never thought about it that way in terms of the way they're siloed a little bit more initially in product, brand, and so on and so forth. It's brilliant.
Yeah, and they're those are very different people, right? Like the mindset of a product marketer and a demand gen. Oftentimes, demand gen marketers, like they're machine builders. Product marketers are like, and it's not to imply that there aren't very strategic, demand gen marketers out there, but product marketers are like, oftentimes helping shape the strategy, the go-to market strategy in a very direct way. Right. So, they're very different profiles.
Yeah. I feel like the product ones have to have domain kind of expertise much more and stuff as well. Yep.
Yeah. Oftentimes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing that's kind of a top of mind of a lot of people right now is, and I'd be curious to get your perspective, especially considering you're helping these organizations and these leaders in these organizations to hire their sales and executives and their marketing executives. But how do you know that it's going to be a good fit from an alignment standpoint? Because it's very difficult for CEOs and a lot of these startups to make sure that sales and marketing are aligning around the go-to-market and their ideal customer profiles and things like that. Are there things that you look for and or assess in the hiring process that can kind of be an identifier of that, or kind of tee off the not tee off, but go ahead and give the CEO or the board insight as to, that's going to be a good marriage between those two, because you really need to make sure those two are aligned if you're going to have the success you're looking for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I'd say that some healthy tension between sales and marketing is obviously normal, and by definition, not a bad thing if it's healthy tension, right? Yeah. Now, there's a point of misalignment and a point of tension where like it becomes counterproductive to the organization. But I do think some healthy tension is natural and positive for most organizations. And then I think a lot of that goes back to just company leadership and how well you hired both of those people, right? Are you setting clear goals? Do you have clear incentives? And, is that an OKR process or some other process that happens internally where people understand what the North Star really is within an organization, and then incenting people the right way, and then hiring people that actually have the skills, motivation, and fit to go accomplish that North Star, right? So like, that probably sounds like a oversimplification, but I do think it comes back to sort of clarity at the very top of the organization. Whereas, there's marketers where it's just like, hey, if like what you're telling me, CEO, that what I need is a bunch of top of funnel, then like, all right, I'll pump out MQLs, right? Like, all right. And now my sales leader is probably not going to love that, because like what he needs is revenue, right? So it's just like, you need to make sure that the incentives are aligned versus saying, hey, marketing, like it's not really about MQLs to me. What I care about is like the full funnel, and I care about how much revenue comes out the bottom. And of course, enough at the top, but like, there's a lot of ways to get there. And is it more MQLs? Is it more top of funnel? Is it better conversion, or is it bigger deals? Right. Because like as a revenue leader, that's how I always thought about it. There's really only 3 levers I have to hold, right? I can have more opportunities, I can convert better on those opportunities, or I can close bigger deals. And I want my marketing leader aligned with me about which of those levers we want to go pull on together within the organization. So yeah,
I think that's fantastic advice, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, Brandon. Which is, you really do have to align the CMO, the chief revenue officer, and your product, your head of product, around the same company revenue goals and operating goals, right? Because if you don't do that, that's where you get the silo type efforts, and everybody's going off on their own direction. And you're not flying in formation, and you're not going to get to the destination. So I think you are spot on. That is awesome.
Totally. And that goal doesn't always, right? A super early stage company, maybe it's not about revenue yet, right? Maybe it's just say, hey, our goal is we just need users at this point, right?
X number of users or customers, right? Or usage of the product.
Exactly. Exactly. But like the alignment, regardless of, there's no right or wrong on the goal. That's like company specific. But to your point, that alignment, everyone in the organization marching in the same direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Yeah, this has been a masterclass on hiring and leadership and everything, and we'll probably wrap it up there. I stopped taking notes because I'm excited about watching it back tomorrow in Sketch. So yeah, that was great, Brandon. Thank you so much.
Awesome, Brandon. Very informative, and really appreciate that you were able to hang out with us here for our session of Closing Time with Pat and Dennis.
Yeah, guys, I appreciate you having me. I had fun.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, until next time, Dennis, the bar is closed.